Today, we're going to talk about Dockstore, which we mentioned briefly previously. I'm a developer at Dockstore. My name is David Steinberg. And we'll export a workflow from Dockstore to Terra. And then after that, we'll set up a GitHub repo so that we can automatically push code changes from Dockstore to workflows that we can launch in Terra. And we'll upload a workflow to GitHub to bring to Terra. And then we'll also take a look at some of the Dockstore features for finding existing workflows or doing some more advanced things with your workflows once they've been published. Yeah, to those who already joined, we're just getting started, and yeah, head over to get the slide deck so you can follow along at your own pace too. So yeah, let's first start by talking about Dockstore at a high level. Like I said, I'm a developer for Dockstore and have been working with the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research, collaborating with UC Santa Cruz for several years now to develop this attempt at an app store for bioinformatics. So what this means is there's a open source platform where you can find and run workflows that can be executed on various analytical platforms or your local machine. And so Dockstore attempts to be platform agnostic. Today, we'll be focusing a lot on the WDL-Terra connection. However, there are other ways to use Dockstore as well, which we won't be talking too much about today. But at a high level, you should already be familiar now with the idea of a container. We talked about Docker containers previously, which are a way for you to package up all of your software dependencies and operating system into one Docker image. And then yesterday, Kaylee familiarized us with the idea of a descriptor in the workflow descriptor language, which allows you to interact with the applications and containers using a simple scripting language. So you can orchestrate analysis using the applications that are inside containers and make them reusable for other people by changing things like the inputs and outputs. So combining these container and descriptor technologies, Dockstore allows us to create like reusable workflow descriptions that can be downloaded for other people to use from the Dockstore website. This slide shows you what Dockstore attempts to do by acting as like a platform agnostic way of interacting with different services out there that people use in order to do their workflow development. So on the left, it shows that we interoperate with a couple of different source control repositories. We'll be talking primarily about GitHub today. However, other source control repositories work as well. So you can do your work wherever you do your source control, and then it will show up in Dockstore. And then we also do our best to interoperate with various Docker registries. Like we talked about on the Docker Day, there's more than one Docker registry. There's Quay is an example, and the Amazon has the Elastic Container Registry, and Google has one as well. But today and through this workshop, we've mostly talking about Docker Hub. So you can define your workflow in source control and upload your container to a registry, have it show up on Dockstore, and then from there, you have a nice, easy interface for performing your analysis in the cloud in services like Terra that we'll be talking about today. So here's a screenshot of the Dockstore interface showing the launch with buttons on the right for the Optimus workflow, which we've talked a little bit about. Let's go ahead and jump over to Dockstore so I can show you what this launch with process looks like and how you can find some workflows yourself. So heading over to dockstore.org, you should have already created an account if you haven't. Dockstore accounts are linked with your Google and GitHub accounts. And so from here, I'm just going to show you the process of going to search. And it'll take me to a search page, which has a number of facets so that we can restrict our search or a free text input here. So I'll just type in Optimus here. And looking at my results, I see the workflow I'm looking for, Broad Institute Warp Optimus, and I can go ahead and click through on that. If I'm going too quickly here, please do stop me. I see a couple people are still joining. So right now we're just going through the process of finding a workflow on Dockstore and then seeing what it takes to launch it in the Terra platform. So I just searched for Optimus, I found it, and then from there, I can select the version that I want, because the Optimus developers have a number of different versions associated with this repository. So I'm going to select the 5.5.5 version just by finding it and then clicking it, and you can see changing version to Optimus version 5.5.5 succeeded. And then scrolling up to the top here, one second, it took me quite a few versions here. I have these nice launch with buttons available. So I selected my Optimus version and I click export this workflow to Terra. And now you can see I left the Dockstore site and then now over at the Terra site in a new tab and have been brought to this import workflow interface. On the left here is the actual WDL. So this is a more complicated WDL than we worked with previously, but the principles are the same in that there's inputs, tasks, and outputs. And then on the right, we can name the workflow and have a target destination workspace for it. So I'll go ahead and just create a new workspace so you can see that process. WDL Bootcamp May. And I'll select our billing project, which we've provided, and then I can just create workspace. And it takes just a second. Also mention, you might have seen this warning here. This warning really is just to tell you that there's no way to guarantee that the content of the workflow is exactly as it showed up on Dockstore between going from Dockstore to Terra. So it's a good idea to check to make sure that you're not loading someone else's file by accident. Okay, so this should be a screen that is familiar to you already from the previous day. This is now showing the workflow, the Optimus workflow that has been loaded into a Terra workspace. And as before, we have the ability to enter in our inputs and select the input files as we like, and then you know, if we were to go through this process, I could show you running analysis, but the point here is really that you see that workflows that show up in Dockstore, they're published in Dockstore, can be loaded into a Terra workspace to run. I'll show you one other thing here, which is that the versions also show up within the Terra interface. So if there's a specific version that you want to use that's not the version that you loaded originally, you'll be able to access it using this pull down here. So any questions to start on that process of finding an existing workflow and launching it within Terra? Great. When selecting the 555 version before hitting the Terra button, only to make it default. So that sets the version that will load when we click launch with workflow. And so it does not change the metadata for the workflow itself. It only changes for me, the user of this workflow, which version will be launched when I click here and which metadata information will be shown when I click through these other tabs. So in answer to Mushrik's question, I reserve the use of snapshot because this is a particular word that we use within Dockstore to mean something else. But in principle, we're selecting as a user which version we want the Dockstore interface to show and what will be launched when we click the Terra launch with button. let's see, I could not find version 555. So if we get to the, if you were able to get to the Optimus page here, there are a couple of different warp repos, but we want the one that's warp Optimus. And the version list is a bit long. So for this part, I actually used my Control F to get me down to version 555. Great. So Ginu has a question. What's the difference between launch with Terra and with Anvil? So from the Dockstore perspective, the launch with buttons will take you to a different endpoint where the workflow will be executed. So in specific between those two, Anvil and Terra, I believe Anvil has a different set of security requirements, a different URL associated with it, and different default data, although parts of the interface are very similar because the Anvil is running on Terra. The Anvil execution environment is running on Terra. So it's a good question. I think in practice, it means a different endpoint and different security concerns, different data access requirements.
Actually, can I just jump in here really quick? Anvil and Terra are essentially the same. Really the only difference between them, Anvil is Anvil powered by Terra. So it's basically just Terra that looks different. It has all the same functionality and everything. It's used by the Anvil group.
Thanks, Kaylee. And Akanksha offered a great point, which is that this table of versions is sortable using the different columns here. And so that can help you find what you're looking for as well. I'll go ahead and move on then. Yeah, thanks to everyone for your comments and questions and for following along. So that shows us finding existing workflow in Dockstore and launching it into Terra. Next, we're going to, well, if you want to do this yourself and weren't able to follow the directions I described, there's a link to a step-by-step here within the Terra documentation. So feel free to come back and try this again if you had any trouble or weren't following along just now. So next, we will go through the process of setting up our own workflow and GitHub repository, and then synchronizing that GitHub repository with Dockstore, which will then allow us to make changes within GitHub that will be reflected in Dockstore and then can be launched into Terra without having to do really any clicking other than what you would otherwise be doing with your source control in GitHub. So the step-by-step instructions for these are available here. And we'll go ahead and open up the Dockstore instructions for this one. So at a high level, we'll be creating a GitHub repository, and then we'll install the GitHub app to it. And then we'll add a specialized file along with our workflow descriptor files that allows Dockstore to index the content of that repository and have it show up. And then there will be a slight wait while the synchronization occurs. And when it's all done, we should be able to see our workflow reflected in Dockstore. So this is going to be mostly a demo today, but we'll likely have time at the end if people want to stick around for an exercise. So if you're feeling daring, follow along, but otherwise just go ahead and watch, and we'll be here to answer questions after we're all done. So from my I have a GitHub account that I'm logged into, and so I'm at github.com. I'm going to create a new repository here. And when I come to the new repository page, I'm going to give it a name. We'll call it WDL Bootcamp May. The description's optional. We do need to leave it to public so that the Terra workflow import will work. And we'll also just add a README file, and we can leave the rest defaults. I'll go ahead and create a repository. And so now I have an empty repository here called WDL Bootcamp May. Next, I'm going to go back to Dockstore to tell it about this new repository I've created. So from the Dockstore interface, I can pull down to this My Workflows page, which will take me to a list of all of my workflows. Now, you'll see I have a number of them already here. Yours might not be as full to start, but that's fine. This process will add one. Following this plus register a workflow button here, we are taken to a wizard, which will help walk us through the process of doing our GitHub repo Dockstore synchronization. So we'll leave the default here, which is that we want to register using GitHub apps. And then the second step of the wizard takes us to a page to manage Dockstore installations on GitHub. So this will now take us away from the Dockstore page momentarily so that we can configure the, sorry, one second here. So that we can, yeah, sorry about that. So we can configure which repositories we want the Dockstore application to sync with. So we've created our repository called WDL Bootcamp May. And so now this is added in the repositories that Dockstore can help manage. Now I'm granting a permission to Dockstore to just be able to read and see changes to my public GitHub repository. Dockstore won't be able to make changes back to the repository. It's a read-only permission. So once I save that, it brings me back to the Dockstore interface, but we haven't added anything to our repository yet. So we're going to need to add the workflow that we want to show up and also the metadata so that Dockstore knows how to index it properly. Now this is all in the directions here, but let's go back to our slides, which will help us with this. So now we're going to add a WDL file to our repository and also a file called a .dockstore.yaml, which is this specialized file that provides the metadata that Dockstore needs to index the workflow. So I'll go ahead and download this. I'm just gonna copy it from another window. And then we'll go back to, GitHub here, and we'll add a file, create a new file. So I've copied the contents of a BAM, maybe.
Excuse me, David.
Oh, please.
Hey, I was a little bit cavalier and selected all my repositories to be shared with Dockstore. Is there a way to reverse that and go back to the selected specific ones?
Yeah, I think if you follow that same process of like register a workflow and then it'll take you to configure on that same page. You can remove repositories following that same interface.
Oh,
And,
cool.
Yeah, please, yeah, if you struggle to get that done, just wait till after and I'll walk you through the process of clean that up too. So
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, it's no harm, no foul. It's just you know, some bits and bytes flying around the internet that might not be that useful, but yeah, thanks for asking. And for those of you following along, go ahead and give it a shot. And like I said, this is mostly a demo, so if you're just watching now, that's fine too. We'll stick around afterwards. We should finish with time for you to be able to do this as an exercise afterwards if you are so curious.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so I downloaded this BAM file, or sorry, I downloaded this WDL that is our you know, familiar SAMTools index stats workflow that we worked on before. And I will give it a name. Let's go ahead and reuse the name here again. And So this will add the WDL file to my repository in the root directory of the repo. So if I commit changes, you can add, if you're not familiar with Git already, it's a way of controlling which changes will appear and following all of the different changes across your code. So you can give a description for every change. We're just going to leave it blank for now because it's not super important for what we're doing. But you'll see now I have added this file, WDL 101 bam.wdl, which should be familiar from yesterday. Now, the second part that we need to do is we need to add another file, which I talked about before, which is the one that tells Dockstore what to look for in order to create the metadata to index this repository. So let's go back over here and we can grab an example YAML file to go with what we've done here. We talked about YAML before. It's a markup language that attempts to be mostly human readable. And before I go and create this file, let's just step through it really quick. So at the top level, there's a version because we want to be able to make changes to the YAML description if necessary. And then there's a list of workflows because repository can house more than one workflow. In this case, we're really only going to do one, which you see here. And I mentioned before that Dockstore supports multiple descriptor languages. Today, we're really talking about WDL, and the one that we're adding is a WDL. So you see this line, subclass WDL, points us to make sure that we're indexing that properly. And then this next line, primary descriptor path, is what you would expect it is, that we tell Dockstore where the primary descriptor is, where the WDL that describes our workflow is in the repository. And it's preceded by a / to tell us that it's in the root directory of the repository. So it's like an absolute path relative to the repository root. These other two fields I want to mention really quick because Dockstore takes advantage of them. When you're designing a workflow, you can provide the parameter file, which says like what the inputs are supposed to look like for a workflow. So you can give people a good idea of what the initial inputs will look like for their workflow. And so this is an optional field for Dockstore, but this is what test parameter files points to. And then also there's an authors field, which is powerful since oftentimes people managing workflows might not be the same as managing the Dockstore entry, and it's also a list. And you'll see here, if you're not familiar with this, this is the Open Researcher ID, ORCID, which allows you to, I'll get to your question in 1 second, which allows you to point to your personal like research identifier across institutions. So if you ever change institutions or want to be able to link back to yourself as you go through your career and have all of your publications in one place, ORCID is a really nice way to do that. And I'll talk about it a little bit later as well. So let's see. Oh, we got some answers. Yeah. This is YAML syntax. The dash is how we are telling the YAML that we're talking about an entry in an array. And so you can have multiple test parameter files. And that's what the dash means here, as well as here, as well as here, so that we can have multiple workflows, multiple test parameter files, or multiple authors as necessary. And then we have another question. The test parameters needs to be a file or could be a list of variables. It depends completely on your workflow. So the test parameter file is a file and is a JSON file primarily, which will contain within it either a list of file inputs or contain like variable inputs as well. And so the test parameter file depends on your workflow. And like in the case of our WDL 101 BAM would contain the location to the file name for the BAM that we want to to be analyzing to create the index stats for. Thank you everyone for the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and grab just the necessary parts of this Dockstore YAML. How do I connect the GitHub that was forked to the repository I created initially? That's done, if I understand correctly, if you have forked a repository and you are in the control of it, then when you create a new workflow on Dockstore using the register a workflow button, you should be able to see your forked version in there and can configure it to be synchronized with Dockstore that way. But if I didn't capture your question correctly, give it one more go. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and continue with taking this Dockstore YAML, and we're going to add it to our repository here. So we're going to
the YAML syntax is tabs at all these indents, or is it?
We encourage 2 spaces per logical block. Tabs are generally discouraged. So
okay,
you
cool.
can see when I just copied over just now, I didn't keep my indents, so you'll get to see me doing that here. So this one's 2 spaces, and then this one is within the logical block of the workflow, so I need to give it 4 spaces. Okay, so now we have this metadata file, and it has a very specific name, which Dockstore looks for in the repository called the dockstore.yaml. And now, just like before, I'm going to go ahead and commit these changes, and we're not going to add a description for the commit. And we now have what looks like a full repository for what Dockstore needs in order to create an entry on Dockstore that could then be launched in Terra. So let's go back over to Dockstore, and I'll show you on the left here is where it lists your existing workflows. So this process, as I mentioned, can take a couple of minutes to synchronize, sending the information from GitHub over to Dockstore and then have it be reflected here. I'm going to go ahead and close this banner. We're working on a release. So I'll hit refresh here and show you I mentioned I have a number of repositories already. And so under my unpublished workflows, we may be able to see the WDL Bootcamp May one showing up. Let's see. Looks like not yet. So that's okay. Like I said, it takes often a minute or 2, and that gives me a chance to talk about, if you're doing this along with that, we have this nice feature here to help you diagnose any issues that might happen in the process. So here we see the repository WDL Bootcamp May push failed, and this is because after I connected it, I hadn't added my Dockstore YAML yet, but then it was followed by a success. So I think between the last time I refreshed and clicked the apps logs, it probably showed up. So let's go ahead and go back over here. And here's the WDL Bootcamp May repo that we just created in GitHub showing up in Dockstore. Excuse me while I move around my windows here. So clicking onto the WDL Bootcamp May, I now can see the file that I created in GitHub showing up in Dockstore, and also have a list of versions that go with the changes that I made there. I'm going to go ahead and let's see, show you that for the versions we have different actions that can be performed. So I'm going to set main as the default version and then go ahead and publish it. So now the repository that I made on GitHub has been synchronized with Dockstore, and there should now be a public page that goes with this after I click publish so that anybody can come through and see my workflow. So this is great. Now this link here is one that anybody can go to. So I'll paste it in chat just for your interest. This is my newly created WDL Bootcamp May workflow that's on Dockstore. And from here, I can do the same thing we did for Optimus and click the Terra Launch With button. It'll take me to this familiar interface for importing a workflow. I need to choose a workspace and click import. And following the same process we saw with Optimus, we now see our SAMTool index stats task showing up in Terra. And like we said before, the only input here is going to be the BAM file. And so we can follow the same process we followed yesterday in order to input a BAM file and actually run the workflow on data of our choice. So that is, in a nutshell, the process of creating a GitHub repository if you haven't done that before, and then adding the .dockstore YAML and the WDL file to the repository so that the Dockstore has the ability to index the contents of this repository, and then publishing it and having it show up on Dockstore. And from there, as we mentioned, you can export your workflows to Terra. So thanks everyone for following along for that. And I know that maybe some of you are trying this right now. If you don't mind keeping your questions till the end, if you're struggling, it's okay. We'll stick around because I think we're going to have plenty of time to work on this as an exercise. But in the meantime, I want to talk a little bit more about some Dockstore features to familiarize you with them, so that when you come back to do more of your work here, you know your way around a little better. So some of the troubleshooting tools that we provide that are related to issues that we've seen come up again and again are, the first one I mentioned, the GitHub app logs. So I'll go ahead and show you that one more time. If you're going through and trying to do this right now, you'll notice that when you go to the My Workflows page, under the under your GitHub user, there is a button here for apps logs. And when you click this, it brings up a modal, which will show the all of the different events that have been sent from GitHub over to Dockstore. So if there's any kind of issue, you can see. And so I mentioned before that I expected this one to fail because we hadn't provided the .dockstore.yaml, and there's a friendly error message that's provided here for when that happens. And so you can see in that first push when we had set up Dockstore synchronized with GitHub but hadn't added a .dockstore.yaml, it gave us this nice error that says could not retrieve .dockstore.yaml. Does the tag exist and have a .dockstore.yaml? Terminated processing of .dockstore.yaml. And so when we then added it, it was successful just following that. So the GitHub apps logs are a really nice way for troubleshooting any issues you might run into connecting your GitHub repo to Dockstore. And I also pasted in an example of if you have an error in your .dockstore.yaml that you did provide, we do our best to provide some useful error messages for that we ran into when parsing your .dockstore.yaml. And so those should also show up in the GitHub apps logs. So you may find that useful in the exercise later. Then this other feature is people often ask us, where's my workflows for the group that I work with, for the GitHub organization that I'm involved in. I showed you creating a repository under my own GitHub username. However, you may be a part of other GitHub organizations. And so in order for Dockstore to learn about those, you have to go ahead and click this Discover Existing Workflows button, which will go through and do a best effort of finding workflows that exist in your other organizations and having them show up here. And so if you are working with other people who are doing workflow development, this can be a useful tool in making sure that you're all looking at the same thing. And then lastly, in troubleshooting the tools of getting your GitHub synchronization set up, I'll mention that we also have a way of validating your .dockstore.yaml locally. Dockstore provides a command line interface that you can download to your local computer, and using that Dockstore CLI, you can run a YAML validator tool, which will perform the same error handling on parsing your .dockstore YAML and do its best to create a nice error message for you so that you can figure out what problem we ran into when parsing your .dockstore.yaml. And so you can do this work locally without having to push things up to GitHub to test them first. Great. Okay. Thanks everyone for following along with that little demo. Like I said, we'd love to help you get started with getting your stuff on Dockstore, and we'll have some time at the end to do it. Before that, though, I wanted to show you some Dockstore features to encourage you to make good use of the site and hopefully encourage the organizations you're a part of to get involved too. So we mentioned search as a powerful way of finding workflows that are for your specific use case. Dockstore aims to be a app store for bioinformatics, and so that means that we need to provide nice ways of getting at common bioinformatics tasks. And so here we have implemented categories. There's free text search. You can sort by language, the descriptor language, the author, which source control repository was used, and so on. I want to especially draw your interest to the organization area here, which we have listed at the top. So if you click over to organizations, you can see all the organizations that have registered themselves with Dockstore. And if you have an organization that would like to curate your workflows on Dockstore, we highly encourage that using this create organization request. The only thing that we ask is that you have associated that you were able to identify that you're a part of the organization by associating either your ORCID account or multiple third-party accounts here, so that we can make sure that you're not trying to impersonate one of these organizations. But you can see here there's a number of organizations that have put their workflows on Dockstore. Let's go ahead and click over to Broads. When you click into an organization's page on Dockstore, you get a list of collections, which are a little bit like YouTube playlists of workflows, so that the organizations can curate their workflows in such a way that they desire. And so here we have the collection for work pipelines, and you can see up at the top here is our familiar Optimus workflow. And so we can, so organizations can use the collections feature in order to put together all of the workflows that they consider to be related in ways that make sense to them. And you can also click through and see which members of which organizations have connected their Dockstore accounts, and also get at a glance updates on what's being actively maintained. So organizations is a really powerful way of finding and curating workflows that Dockstore makes available. And yeah, like I said, please do, if you have a lab that is doing workflow development, we want to encourage you to get your work out there in a reproducible way. And so we have documentation for getting your organizations and collections created, and then curating the data on them and so on. Any questions on organizations?
Just to be sure, and I'm pretty sure I understand this, you don't get added as an organization just because like when you add your connect your GitHub, it shows in my workflows different organizations that you're part of. More so like whenever you have to purposefully create an organization, even if it like matches your GitHub organization name or something like that. It's like a Dockstore entity, not an inherited entity.
Correct. Yes, that's correct. However, we do our best to take advantage of the existing, like if you have a GitHub organization that matches the what you want to have as the Dockstore entity, we do our best to respect the permissions that you've already created via GitHub and have them reflected on Dockstore. So yes, they're separate entities, and we do our best to make it easy for you to reuse any like user management efforts you've already put into GitHub.
Cool, thanks. That helps.
Definitely. Any other questions? It's a good question. And we're definitely looking to help people get on board if you have an organization that is interested in getting something up there. Okay, I'm now going to talk about another Dockstore feature that I touched on really briefly before in a couple ways. So you're probably familiar with this concept of DOIs, or digital object identifiers, because if you've ever published a paper, you know that it's given one of these DOIs that allow it to be traced across the internet and goes with your citations. And it allows you to easily reference all of the authors using a single identifier instead of having to write out an entire citation every single time. And so Dockstore, in an effort to improve the reproducibility of the methods part of papers, has implemented a similar feature for workflows themselves. So your paper can have a DOI, and so can the methods that were used in order to write that paper. So I'll just walk you through what is in the slide here. In order to guarantee reproducibility, we need to make sure that a workflow hasn't changed since it was created. And so when you are going through to mint a DOI and then connect it to your open researcher identifier, we first ask you to snapshot your workflow. So this is why I said I can't use the word snapshot when the question was asked before, although it's similar. This is now for you as a workflow developer or workflow manager, creates a read-only version of a workflow that can then not be changed later. So you freeze the metadata, you freeze the workflow descriptor contents and the container associated with it when you create a snapshot, so that for the sake of reproducibility, it can't simply be changed later and break for people down the line. And so Dockstore walks you through this process of snapshotting your workflow and then creating a digital object identifier through an integration with Zenodo, which will then upload the contents of your DOI to Zenodo for storage and reference later. And then lastly, that can be connected to your open researcher identifier so that anybody can go and see which workflows you have created and connect them with your specific identifier, which will show up on your ORCID profile. Just like if you are already an ORCID user, you know that when you add a paper, this shows up on your ORCID profile. The same can be done for workflows through this Dockstore integration. So this is an effort that Dockstore went through in order to improve the reproducibility of bioinformatics workflows and encourage people to take a look when doing methods for their next paper of integrating it in such a way that other people can really do the reproducible part of the science effort using Dockstore this way. through this integration with Zenodo and Orchid. I know that was at a high level. Any questions on that? I can show you sort of how that works.
So we could even publish this little demo that we were doing today. That's
You certainly can, yeah. You certainly can do that. So I'll show you, let's see, I published the wrong different group I'm a part of, WDL Bootcamp May. And so when I go to versions here, I can see, let's see, I need to make a tagged version first to do this, which I'm not going to do for you right now. But in principle, you create a new, a tagged version, like a release on GitHub. That will show up here as like a fixed released version number. And then you pull down this actions bar, and then you can snapshot and create a DOI from here. That will link you over to Zenodo if you have a linked Zenodo account here. And if you have a linked Zenodo and Orchid account, you can export it, the minted DOI to Orchid, and you can do that all from Dockstore using that pull down that I was showing you. Let's see, pull up the chat again, sorry. Okay, yeah, thanks for your comments, Jean-Paul. Okay, so yeah, that's the end of the sort of Dockstore demo that I wanted to give you and some of the features. As I mentioned, we are going to stick around to help you get started with getting your example workflow into GitHub and Dockstore if you would like to. And so let me go ahead and just finish up the prepared slides that we have here. As was mentioned yesterday, if you want to set up locally so that you don't have to run through Terra to do all of your testing, you can set up Cromwell locally, as we saw yesterday. And I believe the billing account will still be active for a couple more days, so we definitely encourage you to take advantage of that while it's available. I'm going to do my best to kind of wrap up some of the concepts that we've heard throughout these workshop days to set you on the right path for doing some of your workflow development. And you've heard most of these things before already, so there shouldn't be any surprises. So we mentioned, like, when you're thinking of designing your workflow, don't put it all into one bucket. There's no kitchen sink approach to this. You want to make things into discrete steps if you can, and have tasks have the minimal amount of dependencies and software needed in order to carry out the specific thing that you want to do. The way that we encourage you to do that is to use Docker images that wrap up the specific task that you're trying to carry out, and then putting those Docker images onto a public repository so that they can be used by others and used in the execution engines that are available, like Terra. Following on that, the WDL tasks is a great way to break up your analysis into understandable chunks. And so each step is put under a WDL task, and then combining together a set of WDL tasks, you create a WDL workflow, which we all went through yesterday. And before you go and try to test out your workflow on a giant data set, it's always good to create small scale example data to work with, and to test it locally so that you're minimizing the amount of issues that you could run into as you're getting started. Once you're feeling confident about your workflow working as you expect, we then encourage you to do what you saw today, which is setting up GitHub to make it so any changes that you make to your workflow will automatically be pushed to Dockstore, and once in Dockstore, can be launched into Terra. And now we're working in the cloud. And once your workflow is in a Terra workspace, you'll be testing your workflow there. And from there, you can start to scale your inputs to larger data sets and make sure that things are working as expected, and then go back and iterate through the process of testing, scaling inputs, making your changes to your GitHub source control, and having them push to Dockstore automatically. And we do our best to provide you with more resources so that you're not just left alone with the slides. When you download the slides, go ahead and check these out. As we mentioned, the instructions for getting the synchronization set up, the best practices for working for minimizing costs for workflows, and also how to use Cromwell to its best ability here. Okay, so thank you everyone for sticking around so far. Like I said, I'll still be here for as long as people are interested until let's see, 3 or noon my time. But if you're planning on heading out or have a minute, please do fill out this survey. I'm going to go ahead and paste it.
Is the survey for every day, like each day that we've been provided the survey link, is it still just populating a new response to the same survey that we've been filling out? Like,
it's a different survey link for each day. If you have the time and energy, it's only a couple questions. We would love it if you could give us feedback for the day. If you haven't done the other days and are willing to give us some feedback now, you can just throw it into the one here, and we'll do our best to parse it out from that. But our intention is to try to get feedback for each day, since it's different content and different speakers and stuff.
Can you, I don't know how crazy it could be for y'all to add maybe the prior days links, just in case anyone missed like yesterday's or the day before. I'm sorry to put that work on you. I know I've been in there.
No,
if
no.
you're willing to fill it out, yeah, please,
Yeah,
Kaylee,
no
please.
problem. I'll post that stuff in the chat for anyone who's going to stick around, and I'll include all of the survey links in the email that I send out later as well. Yeah,
that would be really super helpful, and people can straggle in to do the ones they didn't get a chance to.
We super appreciate it. And I'm glad to hear that you want to fill out more surveys. That's great.
Well, I've been in your position. I'm a carpentries instructor. I get it. We do pre and post every single time, so I get it. It's important.
And if you want to communicate with us about anything that doesn't fit into the survey format, there's an email here to reach out to us later for other requests. Yeah, thanks everyone. Like I said, I'll stick around to work through this exercise of integrating your GitHub repo. And if you're not gonna, if you just want to listen, that's fine. But yeah, thanks everyone for your time. And if you're headed out, have a great weekend.
Can I jump in with a question?
Yes, you may. Yeah, now's the time.
Cool, thank you. Again, thanks for all of the instructional materials and the instruction. It's been super informative. I wanted to tap into the topic of using Cromwell. In our group, we have like, you know, a server that our team all, you know, connects to. I don't believe it's running Cromwell right now, but is it like a kind of scenario where you load Cromwell and then you use Whittle for on the server the same kind of way? And then since if we commit to Whittle, we could port that to the cloud for cloud-based workflows if our server can't handle something.
Let's see. I'll take a stab. I think that, yeah, we also, okay, we have Denis here too. So Cromwell is a Java application that runs on your local machine to do the task of workflow orchestration from the local machine. Cromwell also, sorry?
Pause for a sec. So when you say local machine, and I indicated like a remote server for our group, could that Are you considering that as a local machine as well?
Yeah, sorry. Let me do my best to explain, and then we'll pick apart my explanation. But
Okay.
so yes, you are in control of how the Cromwell jar will be run, and so you can download it to whichever system you want to run from. Cromwell also has kind of like its own server mode. I'm not very familiar with it. I'm somewhat familiar with it, so that you can run it in such a way that it can be accessed from like sort of a hybrid cloud scenario or like a private cloud sort of scenario. So you can run Cromwell on a server that's shared amongst your team. I can't step you through all the specifics of that during this talk, but I know that it's a jar that you can run on your computer locally. It has a server mode, so you can do like shared execution environments as well. And then the same whittles will run in Terra as well once you've taken it to the cloud. So I think it will support you in the various stages of your development. Let's see if I can't point you to a specific part of the Cromwell docs for the server mode.
Oh, by the way, I pasted a link in the chat, so it might be helpful explaining. So Cromwell can basically run in local mode, or it can run in a mode where it submits jobs to like Google or HPC or Azure. So that might be of use.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. That's what I was looking for.
But Terra has Cromwell running on it, and all we need is just the whittle workflow really to end up in Terra, correct? That seems
Yeah.
like what we've learned so far is not necessarily what y'all just stated. I'm just differentiating for classifying in my brain to understand the different scenarios.
We're getting into a bit of like Terra architecture, but I believe that is how Terra works. Like you can Terra is set up to run workflows using Cromwell on various cloud backends. And so Terra gives you a nice front end in order to interact with Cromwell in that way. But in principle, it's going to be the same thing if you are running Cromwell on your local machine. Yeah, thanks so much for coming, everyone. Yeah, feel free to hop off if you have other stuff to do, and we'll stick around to answer any questions that you have. And let's see, I see some other chats, but I'm sorry. Does that help?
Yeah, totally. I think it's about commitment to whittle versus other workflows, and I could see if we could set up Cromwell to run in our group server for running our local workflows. It's nice to know that if we commit to using whittle, that then we could scale up to using like Terra resources whenever our local compute is not enough or it's too bogged down and we want to just push something somewhere else. Yeah,
you got the idea. Yeah, you got the idea. And Kaylee, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I think you've got the idea of how this stuff is offered.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. That's exactly what we're suggesting you do basically when you're thinking about moving to the cloud. You know, obviously we talked about why the cloud is a great place for this type of work, but resources can be costly, especially if your workflows aren't optimized yet, or you're just starting to write the workflows and analyze your data. And so doing that kind of thing locally with Cromwell set up on your local machines or your server is really a great way to get up and running and get yourself prepared to move those things into Terra, where you can, you know, increase the scale quite a bit.
Looks like we're getting some questions on people who are working through the exercise. Great, glad to see y'all stick around and taking this for a spin. Puisi, I said in the chat, if you if you're having an issue with your .dockstore.yaml, we can look at it together if you want to paste it or give the link to your GitHub repo if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I can give the link to my GitHub repo.
Yeah, let's see if we can figure that one out. And appreciate you pasting the message. Let's see.
Thanks so much, David. This is Akanksha. This was really great. I'm still following along. I can also post the link to my GitHub repo in the chat. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to, instead of using the Docker image that was given in the tutorial, I'm trying to use a Docker image which is in a Google artifact registry. So I'm not sure if that's why I have this weird message of.
It's a good question. I love to hear that you're trying out more advanced things. Let's take a look at what you've got here. So in terms of the docs, let's take a look at your WDL first, just to see what you're talking about there. Okay, great. Let's see. I think, let me think, is this the right formatting here? This will not, the first thing I want to say is that I think that Dockstore should be able to, sorry, index your workflow either way, but taking a look at this, I think we need more in order to specify the full path. I'm sorry, Denis, do you happen to know, or Kaylee, for the runtime, I'm not sure if this is the right way to point to.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to link an example. I think it does look a little bit unusual. Do you happen to know if this is a public image or like a private image? Because we haven't experimented too much with private ones, but the public ones definitely look like they have a different format.
This is image that I created and I put it in the lab repo, so that it is possible that it's actually a private image. We can, if you just copy it and if you paste it in your browser, you should be able to, like, should ideally pop up. It does, okay.
Yeah, so
Alright,
it looks
yeah,
like it's
okay.
private for me at least, which
okay.
will, that will be an issue. However, let's continue on yours, because I think that might be a separate issue than what we're seeing here. Let's take a look. Okay, so the version of your YAML is should be 1.2. Something happened with the copy paste or something with the YAML version. This should be 1.2, and so the other problem notwithstanding, that should at least get your thing into Dockstore. However, I like the WDL probably won't work from the runtime part. Okay, yeah, go ahead and keep pushing on that and see if we can't get you any further. And I'm going to go over and look at Kovalsky's real quick. All right, so let me look back at the error that we had for you, just so I can get context back. Primary descriptor path is missing but required. Okay, so let's look at your .dockstore.yaml. Great. So one of the this happened to me too, actually, when I copied over the contents of the slide, is that it didn't maintain the indentation. And so YAML, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm listening to you.
Yeah, it's I'll just show, or I have to fork. So yeah, you need to maintain indentation. There should be 2 spaces here, and then 4 for the rest of these, 6 for these and these. So it just, yeah, that was same problem hit me with copying out of the slides, is that the Google slide didn't keep the indentation when I came over here. So take another stab at getting the indentation and then let us know how you do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I'll go back to Conchas real quick. So I think like along the lines of what Denis is saying, and if you set, this is an error that will show up in Terra, I believe. So when you go in to try to actually run your workflow, you'll get an error saying something about not being able to access the runtime when you go to run the whittle. But I don't think that this problem will stop you from getting your stuff into Dockstore. But it's my suspicion that if your team has a its own artifact registry, that you'll need to modify the permissions on it, because the path is not so different. I think that you have the right idea with how you set up the path. It's probably permissions, and it's really going to be the other issue of the Dockstore YAML version that was stopping you from being able to get your stuff into Dockstore.
Okay, I've made the change in the version. I'll check if it's working.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I don't mean to rush you. Just let us know. Let's see. Other people trying it out, have questions. Just going through the chat to make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh no, I'm really glad that people are trying this out. Looking at this stuff the first time is definitely complicated, so we're here to help. Let's see. Error handling push event, error reading is okay. We hit this one again. Let's take a look. See how we did. Oh, so close. These ones, for your sake, you could just remove these optional fields.
Okay.
And then this, I hate to be the one to break it to you. Yeah, the indentation is off by 1 here. So annoying, but yeah, that's how it's very sensitive to change the indentation. So the beginning of subclass should be lined up with primary descriptor path here.
Oh,
so
okay.
that space right there is fiddling you. And make a okay. Oh, perfect. Great to hear it, Akanksha. Okay. And make a please, after creating the repository in GitHub, what do I do? Oh yes, sure. Let's go back to that. Here on the Dockstore site, I log in and then go to my workflows and then register a workflow. And then it takes us to a register workflow wizard. We leave the default register using GitHub apps. And then this will take us over to GitHub and allows us to configure which repository we want to show up here. So in this part, you'll name whatever your repository is that you want to show up in Dockstore. And for us, it was WDL Bootcamp May. For you, it'll be whatever you named your GitHub repository for. And then when you're done with that, when you're done selecting the repository here, click save and it will take you back to the Dockstore site. And yeah, and just let us know how you do with that. Hopefully that gets you to the next step. I'll also mention again, there's this, as you're working through this, some of the folks have pasted their errors from this already, which is great. If you go to your GitHub handle over in the workflows pane over here, and then click apps logs, then all of the different push events that came from GitHub to Dockstore will show up here. And if there's an error, you can just pull down the failed one and then just paste the error over to us in the chat, and we'll see how how we can do. So Denis had to go. Denis is lead developer on the Dockstore project. Before he left, he mentioned to me that we also have a forum for helping people out on the Dockstore side of things. You can definitely email out to the DSP workshops folks, but if you have Dockstore specific issues that are coming up, we are watching intently this forum to help you with your issues. And America, thanks, Millie. Can you help me check everything is okay? Yeah, let's do that. My YAML validation will not be as good as the Dockstore one, but let's take a look to see. This looks right to me at first glance. Let's just make sure that this file is the way that you named it here. Yeah, this looks good. So the only other thing that can, assuming that I'm reading this right, the only other thing that could be going wrong here is that if you made these changes before you synchronized your Dockstore and GitHub accounts, you may have to make a change here so that Dockstore knows about your updates. And so yeah, like if these 3 commits happened 39 minutes ago, but then just 2 minutes ago we set up the Dockstore GitHub integration, Dockstore doesn't know about these things that happened in the past yet. So to fix that, an easy way to fix that is just to go into your README and then edit it and just add like 1 line or just hello or something, so that there's content of a commit that's happened since you've synchronized the Dockstore and GitHub accounts, so that it'll show up. So it'll push that event over to Dockstore. But this looks good. Yeah, not a problem. It looks like we have like 9 folks hanging out, and a couple of you are working through the last steps of getting this all set up. Feel free to ask any questions that you have. Sounds like Royce got it. No problem. You did it on your own, and the directions are all there too on the slides. Link out to the both Terra and Dockstore directions on this, so you won't be on your own if you have to do it again.
Maybe please, can you check the YAML for me?
Yes, let's do that. 1 second. Where's this one?
It's quasi.
Oh, now this part should be top level. Workflows.
Okay.
Yeah. No, don't worry about it. That's why we're here. Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, these ones. So this whole block needs to be sent back 1 indentation, basically.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I don't know. Let's see if Zoom respects. Yeah, Zoom does keep the spaces. Let's see if I can follow this.
I did perfect function.
Oh yeah, sure.
So the push went successfully, and I
Okay.
was hoping after that point, all we have to do is look for that workflow in Dockstore, and then we can publish it. But is there some step that I'm missing because it's not visible in the Dockstore with?
Okay, so you pulled up the apps logs. You see the success push here, and so this needs to be refreshed. So maybe try hitting refresh once to get this pane to show up your unpublished workflow. So you may need to refresh this and then look at the list of unpublished, and then from there you can go and do the publish step. Let me know. if that works.
I'm sorry if this is a repeat question. The workflow that we created from our GitHub repo, that needs to be published for it to be available for Terra to use.
The workflow, so yes, this needs to be public. The GitHub repository needs to be public as well.
On the, yeah, it means I meant to say published on the Dockstore website of things.
Correct. Yes. Sorry, misheard. That's absolutely right. Yeah. So it's at this public page for the workflow that you see the launch with Terra button. There's not another way to do the launch with Terra unless it's from a published workflow.
Cool. I'm about to publish. Thank you.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. How are you doing, Queasy? See, you just updated.
Still failing.
This looks good. This looks good. Yeah, I think this is it. Yeah, give it, let's, and then going over to the Dockstore side of things, hopefully that shows up in your unpublished now. So if you go here to the your username, unpublish it, hopefully it will show up there. If it doesn't, then go ahead and click open the apps logs again and see if we can't nail this one down.
It's still showing me that it failed. I don't know why.
Okay, so you pulled up the apps logs and
Yeah.
then click the failed entry and it'll give you a little pull down and then just paste us
Yeah,
what showed
that's-
here.
it is still returning the same error.
Okay, wait. Let's look at this again then. Where is this?
No. Hang on. This is not the error. The error is this
Oh, good. A new error. Okay.
one.
Let's see. Error handling push event. Error reading document mapping values are not allowed here in string line 2 column 11 workflows. Let's see. You just pushed this 2
Yeah.
months ago. Can it, that error seems like it's the error that goes with the previous version that you had where this was
Okay.
indented. That's my suspicion reading this error. But
Okay.
if you
I refresh again.
yeah. Still yeah, take your time. Oh, okay. This is, yeah, so this is good. We're going through the steps of YAML validating. Let's see, line 3, column 5, subclass whittle. Okay, so apparently my ability to read YAML files is not as good as we had hoped. Let's see. 1, 2, so, what is this? String line 3, subclass whittle. Error while parsing a block. Okay. I am not seeing what the error, I know this is horrible, but I'm not seeing what the error is that we're pointing at here. So let's just go, here's my solution for you.
Looks like author has one space more
Oh.
than test parameters.
We have someone looking. Ah, good eye. That could be it. Line 7. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, line 7. Thank you. Good
I get 100 compute hours on Terra.
eye.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kaylee, you can go ahead and spend the. You have to ask Google for that one. True enough.
Funny how she's not. Oh, you have to ask Google for that one. Okay, thanks, Google. I've already expired my free time on Google. Darn it.
Yeah, Azure will be next. I know that the Terra team's working hard on getting Azure backing as well.
That sounds very interesting. I know it's not the forum to talk about it, but maybe for institutional users, like academic institutions who are locked into Microsoft agreements.
I think that's probably part of the idea. Yeah, definitely.
Or thank you, Terra.
Ah, there you go. More reading.
Yeah, I changed it and it was not working. When I sank it didn't work. So I removed, now I'm removing auto and archive just to see what it will do.
Yeah, those ones are optional. Yeah. Hopefully this one works for you with the, let's see. Yeah, yeah, let us know if you get any more errors. We'll stick around. And yeah, no, great, Akasha. I'm glad that worked. Let's see. Anybody else working through this need a hand with anything or?
On the Terra side of things, once I have connected, I'm sorry, I don't want to absorb all of the question time because I know other people have questions and I'm inclined to always talk a lot. But when I export to Terra, if I hadn't chosen a workspace that we created that had data in it, then I'm kind of disconnected from the data sources from the other projects we worked on over the past few days. Like, does that make sense?
You're
Kaylee,
saying you put it in a new workspace, and so now you don't have access to the data in that other workspace.
Yeah, it seems like I probably should have chosen one of the other workspaces instead of creating a new workspace, right?
You could have done that. Alternatively, in the workspace, actually, let me just pull up a workspace really quick and show you.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Okay, let me go to, let's see. Let's go to my workspace here. So you have a couple of options. The first option would be to go to where your data is located. So I could go to these BAM files and say I want to take the small one. I can take this and I can export this to a different workspace if I'd like to. So I can click export to workspace and then select any of the workspaces I have access to, and I can search to in this tab if I want. So you can export your whole data table to another workspace. You can export pieces of your data table to another workspace. You could also download it as a TSV and then upload it to another workspace. Alternatively, you can go to the where the workflow is. This is not what I wanted to do. I think you can do it from this page actually. And if you click on this, you can copy the workflow itself to another workspace as well. So you can go from either direction to get those into the same workspace if that's what you want to do.
Yes, I see. Cool. I think the way to do it is to go via the data and add it to the workspace. That seems to be the way to do it. But I see both ways work. I guess. Thank you.
No problem.
let me link you. If you copy, let's see, copy mine. This is sort of my last ditch effort on this one.
Okay.
You definitely found an error that confuses me. Try just copy pasting the contents of the Dockstore YAML that I have there, because it will match yours. Let's see if we can't get it through that way.
I still have the same error.
Give it a minute. Once you make that change, it'll take like probably 2 minutes or something once the push has gone into GitHub to end up on the Dockstore side. So yeah, let's give it like a minute or two and then refresh on the Dockstore side, see if it shows up, and if it doesn't, then yeah, back into the apps logs to see if we can diagnose it. Anybody else working through this? See, we have a couple people still on the line. Have any questions or comments?
Hi, I have a question regarding running locally Cromwell.
Yeah.
the instruction it said take small scale data, but data could be of many types. So is there like a tool which works uniformly to take the slice and run it through this Cromwell locally, or is it depending on data you do it separately?
So yeah, it really depends on your data type, how to do the slices. As far as I understand, I don't think there's a way from Cromwell configuration directly to like subset your data. So yeah, like unfortunately, as far as I know, and Kaylee, please correct me, like you'll need to do the slicing differently if you're doing like VCF or BAM. So you have to be a little bit intelligent about how you do that. Things like references, you can just leave in their entirety because it might break things. But for the actual like input data, you're gonna have to come up with a way to slice it. And if they are like SAN tools compliant data types, then you can use SAN tools in order to take subsets. But I don't think Cromwell has this built in.
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to understand like how much work it adds up when we run the workflow locally first before putting it on Terra.
It's a good question. Yeah, it does take a little bit of thought in order to figure out how to subset your data so that it's reflective of what the larger data set would be like. So it's a good question. And yeah, as far as I know, you're going to have to figure out something between the existing tool sets and if you have like custom data types, like how to do it so that it is reflective of what the larger data set would be like.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Is it possible that I have this error because of the machine I'm using?
It shouldn't be. We should be platform agnostic at this point, and it's just your web browser. Let's see. If you go, it has been a couple of minutes now. If like go through it and refresh it one more time for me and check the apps logs to see if there's something there. I have one other idea, which will basically come down to just restarting the process, but I think that we're very close. I'm hoping that with this last change, it should. Yeah, so it's not showing up. It says failed as the most recent GitHub apps log with the same error. Okay. Let's see. So the one other thing I was thinking maybe, but I don't think this is what happened, is when you went to do register a workflow, you used this first one, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then under your username in unpublished, it doesn't have the repository that we're looking for. It's just empty here, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
I think I'm gonna look at your GitHub repo again to see if maybe there's something with how this is done. It's public. 5 minutes ago, we have this simple .dockstore.yaml with a whittle. I mean, I want to send the free compute hours to you. You stumped me. Let me think. Yeah, the only thing I can think to really try at this point is to like to re-register it, like register next, manage, and then disconnect and reconnect this here. Like with the X. But I don't think that's the problem. And I hate to keep asking you to do it, but like maybe what is it? If you hold down shift when you do refresh, maybe it's like not getting a full refresh of the page. And then maybe it shows up. If the other thing I could offer is nice. Good to hear, Jean-Paul. Another thing that I could offer, Quasi, is if you wanted to share screen for a minute, maybe I'd see something that I'm not catching on this
Okay.
side. I'd be comfortable with that.
Yeah, sure. Can you see my screen?
Yeah. I think, let's see. No, so I think this is actually, it looks like we're further along than I thought. Can you click into files for me? In this, on the right of your screen? Yeah, right there in the tabs down a little. Yeah. Okay, so I think what may have happened is that hi, welcome back, Dennis. We're just trying to do some last little troubleshooting. I think what may have happened here is that when this was initially set up, it was registered using a different method somehow. Let's see. Yeah, let's try this again. And then next. And then manage. Yeah. And then, okay, that looks right. It's there. It's already selected actually. Yeah. Let's see. Sure. And then because this message that it says in the info makes me think that we're not using the new registration process when this was set up somehow. And like the workflow path is not set correctly.
Yeah, it looks like if you look at the third line in the info, it looks like it thinks it's like what we used to call a full mode workflow rather than like a GitHub app one. So something strange is going on. Was this added? No.
No, go ahead, Dennis.
Was this added during this workshop?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Can you pull up the apps logs for me real quick? On the left, it's under on this pane here, next to that, to the left of that. Yeah, that one. Success install.
Now it's success.
Yeah, but it's I think we may have a little bit of an issue because I think it was registered using full mode somehow. And then now we need to try, you could try committing again to
So keep in mind, I think that was like 2 minutes ago. So could you try refreshing and see what happens? Because I just wonder if something changed while you were talking. Oh no, I meant the refresh your web browser. Yeah. Okay, no, maybe not. Okay, yeah, I think David, you were about to say you could try another commit.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you go back to your GitHub repo where this is stored and then make another commit to it, we like go to the README or something and just add one line in the README. Yeah, this is mine. Sorry.
No, sorry. This is yes.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to figure out, Jean-Paul. There's something with how it was registered or something. So yeah, this one, and then go. And jump into your README there. Yeah, that works. And just you can add anything. It's fine. So hopefully this could kick something else off on the other side for getting it set up properly. Give it a minute or two. If you want, you can pull up the apps logs there. Yeah, that one. And so when the new event comes in, it'll say push under the type, and hopefully with success. But yeah, it takes like a minute or two for this to show up. So if you refresh your web browser, that's what we need to do get it to show. It's strange because it's there. Yeah, let's. I wish I had hold music for you or something. Sorry. Also, we're in the last couple of minutes of the hour. If anyone else who's still on the line is looking for help and stuff, let's go ahead and get that started now, even though we're getting Kovalsky there if we can. Definitely, thanks for your participation, Jean-Paul. Look forward to hearing more from you about your Dockstore organization. Yeah, so still failed. Okay, what's the error you got? I think, okay, pull open the, click the top top one there, yeah. Okay, so I think what's happening here is that somehow the original registration ended up as a CWL workflow and we're trying to add a WDL workflow. My suspicion is that since the sync is working properly, but we're trying to update a workflow that's already been set as a CWL workflow, it's going to continue erroring. And so my idea for a fix would be to add a name in your .dockstore.yaml so that it will push this workflow to a different repository than the one that has been like accidentally set as CWL. So to do that, let me go to your GitHub repo where your .dockstore YAML is saved. And pull that one open, yeah. And then we're going to edit this. And so add a line under the subclass WDL line. So just hit enter after that one. And then 2 spaces. And then name, colon, let's call it like WDL Bootcamp -2 or something. So it has a different name. That's fine, yeah. Definitely, Emeka. Thanks for sticking around till the end. Glad we were able to get your stuff working. So yeah, this will take like 2 minutes again. But once that push goes from the GitHub side to the Dockstore side, I'm hoping that by the Dockstore will be able to see like we want to make a new repository based on the different name. And so yeah, don't worry about that button. We're just gonna be waiting here. Yeah, you can pull open the apps logs to see if anything has changed. That was the one failed from before. So yeah, we need to give it another minute. This is something I do during testing as well. So the spamming refresh. Ah, good. Okay. So yeah, now if you refresh the browser again, hopefully we get another. Oh, it was there. Yes, WLD_2. See it on the left there under unpublished? In this panel, yeah, up a little, that one. Yeah, yes. So yeah, now, and go check out your files in the tab right there. Yeah, right. Nice. And so from here, you can click publish up at the top there. up a little. It's actually off your screen right now, so you have to scroll up some. Yeah, there we go. Upper right there, publish. Yeah, that one. Oh, right, we didn't do that. So set the default version by going to the versions thing there, actions on the right. You were on the right table, yeah, right there. And then actions, set as default version. And now try publish again. Great. And then you can click that view public page link that just popped up right there. And yeah, and then so the last part of this was that part. Yep, was launch in Terra. And so this will take you to the Terra import workflow. Yeah, we're gonna look into what happened to you because that you found an error that we haven't seen before, but hopefully the rest of this makes sense from the previous day that you'll create a workspace and import the workflow in there and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sorry that took so much, but I'm glad it worked in the end.
Thank you very much. I mean, I had several other issues, but I will chat with you or offline later if you don't mind. Because for the Docker, for instance, I've noticed that I had an issue with Conda.
Oh yeah.
It's create the image, but it starts creating the image, but in the middle, it gives me an error with the Conda. But I mean, I won't take your time to be.
No, if nobody else has other questions for getting the GitHub Dockstore synchronization working, we have 9 minutes in which
I have one issue. I'm not able to see the GitHub repo under the Dockstore in unpublished or anywhere. I waited over 10 minutes now, but it's still not showing.
Can you were you able to pull open the GitHub app logs? Was there an error there in the GitHub app logs? And do you want to share screen or send the repository link and I can look it over, whichever you're comfortable with?
Sure, I can share my screen.
Yeah, great. Okay, this is good. And then can you pull open the Dockstore interface? And let's see the apps logs there. That one, yeah. Failed push. Let's see. And you click it, it will give us details. Okay, it looks like there was an issue in parsing the Dockstore YAML. So we can leave this open and go back to the GitHub repo. Yeah, and take a look at this. Yeah, indentation error with line, the primary descriptor path line, that needs to be indented so that the P and the S are on
like this. Oh, like this.
Like this, with the one that I see now, where the S.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the same thing that we were doing previously, it'll take a minute to propagate, but yeah, you can refresh and check the apps logs occasionally until, I'm sorry, just refresh your web browser. You don't need to do the refresh organization one. That's my mistake for not explaining. But yeah, it takes a minute for it to work its way through. I'm glad we were able to get your stuff working, Kwesi. It was a bit of a puzzle, but sounds like we got it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And definitely, like I mentioned before, Dockstore has forums where if you ever run into an issue, we have people watching the forums all the time to help you get through your issues too. So I'll paste that again if you're ever
awesome. Thank you.
Of course. Ah, there it is.
Okay, great. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
and
seems
you
like
can-
it takes
you
some
can-
time.
It does take a minute or two. Yeah. From here, what we did was we set the default version and then we published if you want to go through the rest of the process. So if you try to publish, it'll say, yeah, set a default version. So there you go. That's right. And then view public page and that link right next to the publish button, it added yeah, link there.
Awesome. Now I can put it on Terra, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you
Oh,
so
absolutely.
much.
Yeah, thanks for sticking around to have your questions answered. If there are no other questions, I think we should call it a day.
All right, sounds good. Thank you everybody for joining us and for your participation this week. You'll get an email from me soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.